Welcome to Confident Predictions. I'm Juan. I'm joined by Chris, as always. And this is the show where we do confident predictions about superhero movies, horror, sci-fi, fantasy, 80s, action figure lines, what have you. And we are never wrong. Chris, how you doing today, man?
Not too bad. They said that we couldn't do it. They said that we
Uh-huh.
shouldn't do it. They asked us not to do it, but we're doing it. We're back,
We're back.
and we have all of the correct takes.
Yeah, so obviously took a break, but we have a pretty great slate of movies and TV shows coming up this summer and into the fall. So thought we'd do a check-in and see what's been going on in the last month or so, and then what's ahead of us. So yeah, so let's start off with what kind of kicked off the summer movie slate, which was Mandalorian and Grogu, which both of us decided not to watch.
Yeah. Well, apparently we started a trend too, because that seems to have been the issue with the movie largely.
Yeah. And yeah, so obviously I've read about the movie, but why don't we do a few confident predictions about what we expect to see in Mandalorian and Grogu when we eventually see it? I don't know. Do you want to start us off?
Yeah. Well, and here's what's so fun about this one is people can immediately check us on these. They do not have to wait at all. They have, in fact, probably already seen it. Um,
Probably.
so I haven't read a ton of reviews, and specifically that was because we were going to have this conversation. I was like, you know what? I'm not going to spoil anything. Not because I care particularly about the plot, but because I just want to be right and I want people to know. Um, I suspect that we're not going to get a ton of cameos. That was my suspicion in this, aside from the people that we already know from the Mandalorian and Grogu. And they showed us in a trailer. What's his name from Rebels? Right, pops up in here.
Yeah, Zed. Yeah.
Um, yeah. But I think beyond that, I don't think we're going to get a ton of ancillary extended universe cameos. I think what we are going to get a ton of, though, is extended universe, like I recognize that thing. Like a bunch of like stuff about the world. Because what I think I've realized is that they think there's a secret hack to the idea of that. What is the Leonardo DiCaprio, the snap and point
Hmm.
meme? Like they can get away with that with stuff where people don't complain because they don't complain about characters being a different race or gender or not being whatever if it's just an object. So like bunch of cool ships that they've seen before, a planet that they've heard of. Like if they can drop enough Easter eggs that don't actually have any plot elements, I think that they kind of consider that a win because all of the fandom will be like, oh, I know Thing, and they talked about Thing. So I think we're going to get a bunch of that, but no actual characters.
I think what is unusual about the movie is that, from what I have gleaned from both reactions to the movie and the marketing of the movie itself, is that it doesn't seem to have been created as a launching pad to a new series of movies, you know? Like you would think, okay, this could be a Mandalorian and Grogu trilogy that kicks off with this first chapter. It kind of feels like this movie is, a fun adventure in the Mandalorian and Grogu story, but we'll pick the story back up again in season 4, some coming to Disney Plus sometime next year or something. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
which to me is
Well, in
interesting
a
because,
similar way to the X-Files movie, where they did the same thing with the X-Files movie between
yeah,
seasons 5 and 6. They put out a movie, but they're like, we're going back to TV. Our intent is not to stay here.
yeah. So I guess my confident prediction is just that, uh, I mean, I think it has a certain ambition to be just a fun, time at the movies, but that it isn't the type of story that, you know, feeds into a larger mythology or like kicks off or teases like further adventures, or you know what I mean, like something, a bigger narrative or story. Um, from what I can, guess, I don't really think there's a lot of Thrawn stuff in it, or they don't. I don't expect them to loop back in Ahsoka or anything like that. It just feels like a very
We're not going to find out that
self-contained
Moff
thing.
Gideon is actually the Mandalorian's dad.
Yeah, and it's not like that I would want that as a fan or as a viewer. Um, but it just seems interesting to me that yeah, that they didn't view this initial, chapter as, something that kicks off something bigger, which it was just, which, has its pros and cons, but you I am a bit surprised that they weren't more ambitious in that regard.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting you point that out too, because it occurs to me the whole premise of buying Star Wars, buying Marvel, everything that Disney did was with an aim towards big tentpole continuing giant narratives. You know what I mean? Like, I think the reason that they wanted Star Wars is so that they could Marvelize Star Wars and this, the keep putting them out. So it is
Right.
strange to like put out a movie that clearly had no guidelines towards being a bigger thing that's going to keep coming out. So it feels very,
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know if scared is the right
yeah,
word, but safe maybe.
if you think about the other like non-saga movies that they produced, it's Rogue One, which had a definitive ending, and then Solo, which I'm sure they probably had a thought that maybe that could spawn a series of movies, but didn't, obviously. Um, so yeah, I don't know. I think uh, fans tend to think of Star Wars as like sagas, So I would just think that um, a new entry with a very popular pair of characters from Disney Plus, could launch a series of movies. And yeah, I don't know. It's just interesting to me. But yeah, so my confident prediction is that I definitely will watch it when it comes out on Disney Plus. But until then, we'll just reserve judgment, I guess.
Yeah. I think this is the only other Star Wars thing I've not seen in theaters aside from, remember when they put the animated Clone Wars
Oh yeah,
out in
yeah,
theaters? Which I think is interesting because it was also a similar sort of like Filoni-esque joint that also
yeah.
focused a lot on the Hutt family.
Right.
So yeah, I also did not catch it in theaters.
Yeah, and honestly, it's the kind of movie that ordinarily I would go see, but I don't know. There's a lot of good stuff coming out, so it just didn't make the cut as far as things that I make it out to the theater to see. Um, so that's a decent segue to what we have seen. I know you watched Backrooms, and obviously Backrooms, Obsession, a pair of horror movies from new creators that made a big splash, obviously, um, beat Mandalorian and Grogu at the box office, and have both had their incredible journeys. Yeah, I don't know what are your thoughts on both just the phenomenon, but then the movie itself.
Yeah, well, I mean, I not having seen Obsession, I can't speak to that one yet. Although I do think it's interesting because Obsession is an original IP, and Backrooms arguably is not, in the sense that it's based on the content that Kane Parsons made on YouTube. What I do think is interesting about that is that they both came from YouTube, but I think arguably Kane had a much more challenging job. Yes, he had a known IP, but he also had a very specific fan base for a very specific kind of thing. And threading that needle is a very delicate balance. Because I don't know if you've seen any of the Backrooms videos online, but and this is said someone who loves them, they're like a halfway point between a science explainer for science that doesn't exist and the world's most haunting realtor walkthrough video, right? Like that's
Right.
so it's a very strange, very specific niche audience that would appeal to that. But I mean, for worldwide, it was millions of people that watched it. But like that doesn't really convert to the big screen very well. So there was obviously, for me, I was like concerned. I was like, I would watch anything about the back rooms because I'm like a liminal space nut. Um, but I was concerned it wasn't going to crack the mainstream public. And I think he did a good job. He cast people that are really talented. I can never pronounce her name. Rensivet, the
I don't
lady
know.
that's the lead, whose name I
Yeah.
can't remember. And then Chiwetel Ejiofor. That's
Yeah.
hilarious. I couldn't pronounce her name, but I had no problem with Chiwetel
Well,
Ejiofor.
we've had practice with him.
But that's true. Yeah, he has cropped up more frequently. But yeah, they were both really great. I thought they did a good job of injecting a narrative arc and some interesting human characters into it, because that has not really been the assignment for the YouTube stuff. And so I think he created smartly something that works in its medium, which is on the big screen. And I'm very excited to see where else it goes. I think he's talked about the early stages of a sequel and also like maybe even a TV series. But I would not have been interested in any of that stuff if it didn't feel like it succeeded in the thing it was trying to be, which was an actual movie, that there's something that was worth seeing on the big screen as opposed to watching on YouTube. And I really loved it. I thought it was super effective. I thought it had a lot of interesting stuff to say about generations after us who have watched the death of the things that we had, things like malls and analog entertainment, and they've sort of watched it all die off. or came into the world after it even existed. And so the Backrooms kind of exists as this really interesting space that represents to them a thing that was already dead before they got here. And they're just kind of watching, I mean, buildings for malls still exist, but there's not really stores in them so much anymore. So you can
Yeah.
go walk around and there's like, two shops in what is otherwise an empty mall. And like, there's something interesting to the idea that, the characters are arriving in the back rooms in much the same way that young people are arriving into malls in 2015 or whatever.
Yeah, I think what's interesting is so I haven't seen the movie, but what you're talking about really resonates with me because I think been this rush to find like the next Backrooms or the next Obsession, and the conversation is so limited to, well, let's find that in YouTube creators, or let's find that in Reddit, subreddits and things like that, which is really kind of missing the point, which is, you know, um, what should be always happening is finding um just these unique niche interests that have a following, and then finding out what is the cinematic or movie event experience of that can that can be brought to life. So that's what's really interesting to me, is that like um obviously not all of them are going to have that cinematic experience that you can, and so that some will try and fail, and which I think is very like borne out by multiple superhero properties that have tried to make a movie out of, that have just been dead on arrival, because it isn't just the idea, is there a movie version of this that should exist. um so yeah, Backrooms is really interesting because it started at life as a YouTube or an internet phenomenon, story narrative. But there's so many other examples. Like the one that came up a couple weekends ago was, I think it's called Amazing Digital Circus, which is this like kind of underground, animated
Yep.
thing, which is also making a big splash. But again, it's, I think it's not just the popularity of the thing itself, the IP or whatever you want to call it, but is there a movie version of this that makes sense that people are going to want to go out and see? Like the other thing that kind of springs to mind to me is like concert movies are kind of a thing now. Like, there's a big Taylor Swift one a couple of years ago. There was a Billie Eilish one that James Cameron produced this year. And it's like, well, obviously those are two huge popular musical performers. But is there a movie version of, telling their story that a lot of people will come out to? And sometimes yes, and sometimes no. There was also that Elvis Presley one that I think Baz Luhrmann did. Um,
Right.
uh, there was,
Well,
the big.
that's a really good point to build off of. With what I think is interesting about the Backrooms is the stuff I was talking about, the thematic stuff that has made it
Mhm.
sort of resonant for a generation. I think also does separate it. It's not just that it has a narrative, but it's also pressing on some sort of like a psychic pressure point. And like you can't just go and find, I don't know, Jeff the Killer or Pepe the Frog just because there's like a bunch of people talk about it online.
Exactly,
It doesn't
right.
necessarily mean that there's anything to it.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So I think that's, the two things that cinema is really good at is like finding something and, making a big spectacle of it. But then on the flip side is just bringing a really, resonant narrative to it as well. So, I think both those things can lead to success when you do identify and find like this niche thing that has an audience, and you want to create a cinematic experience out of it. Like it's both those things. It's either creating something that is just big and, visually appealing, or maybe it's just really leaning into like a really compelling story, which
Yeah. Well,
so yeah, that's why I think that like the shortcut of trying to just like find something on YouTube and turning it into movie isn't going to be a success anywhere without either of those two things.
yeah. Well, I also think that they're really dumb if they don't lean into the sort of like the dual vibes of the death of consumerism and liminal space horror, which are both
Hmm.
big in different ways that don't have anything to do with Backrooms, but could absolutely be duplicated in interesting ways that are not that expensive. And so I won't be surprised if some enterprising low budget horror filmmaker recognizes that those are some of the things that really connected with people for Backrooms. It's not just the lore, but it's also the sort of the vibe that the movie gets you. And if somebody can find a way to duplicate that feeling without duplicating that story, I think that's really going to be where some of the best dividends will pay from Backrooms.
Do you think that there are those properties in the liminal horror space that exist already that will be turned into feature films, or is it going to be more original screenplays coming just that play off those vibes and that kind of existing aesthetic.
Yeah. Well, I mean, selfishly, I have an original project that's liminal space related, so I
Yeah,
hope
yeah.
they do take those. But I mean, even already, like right around the same time, maybe a little bit before Backrooms, actually, Exit 8 came out, which is based on a video game, is liminal space horror, and actually is phenomenal. And it's interesting because that's a similar thing to the Backrooms in that it's a game adaptation where there is basically nothing but gameplay in that game. There's literally no story. You start and you're walking through this space that's sort of like an endless subway hall, and you're looking for anomalies. They turned it into a movie and they added a really compelling emotional narrative to it, and that's what makes it work as a film. And so it seems like that's the same lesson learned as what was learned with Backrooms. So I wouldn't be surprised if there is a ton of material out there, whether it's ARG or video games or whatever, that do tap into the same kind of stuff that Backrooms taps into. And it's just a matter of finding the right ones and knowing what it is you're even looking for, which of course we know studios don't have a freaking clue about.
Yeah, what it kind of reminds me of is like just the explosion of indie films that have happened a couple of times. There was like the Kevin Smith, Tarantino, Robert Rodriguez kind of wave, and then there was like a later wave, like where the mumblecore, like indie films, was like an aesthetic and kind of a wave of filmmakers. And I feel like horror, like I mean, you're obviously very attuned to the different waves of different horror aesthetics and genres, and different things that have kind of sprung up over the years. So like the one that springs to mind to me is found footage, but like what are some other just kind of waves of horror that have kind of come up over the last few years?
Yeah, I mean that is true. That's been a big thing. So obviously, found footage is one. I call it the Blumhouse boom, which was like the give artists a very little bit of money, but
Hmm.
mostly total creative freedom. I mean, quote unquote, the scariest movie in the world, Sinister, kind of came out of that model. I think he had, I don't know, it was like less than $10 million. I think it might have even been like $5 million, and it was like Ethan Hawke and a house and director Scott Derrickson, and he made what is now considered to be the scariest movie on earth. And it was because there was no tinkering.
Yeah,
It was like, we're not spending much, so we're going to leave you alone. So go make your story. And I have often felt like that's the smartest move for horror, and it is kind of borne out with Obsession. $750,000 to make that movie, and that thing has it's now going. I think they said it's the most successful original film released theatrically since the pandemic. Like I think it just beat or is getting ready to beat Sinners. So that's crazy overperformance, And I think it has to do with an original story by a visionary who had a specific thing he wanted to do, and because he was spending so little, nobody really got in his way about it.
yeah, no, that's awesome. Um, so it is funny because so there are the search for new niches, new audiences that can but then there's like the tried and true, which is like what's a superhero that we haven't adapted for the big screen, what's a Mattel toy line that we could adapt to the big screen. And so
Yeah.
you haven't seen He-Man, or sorry, Masters of the Universe, have you?
Correct. I have not watched it yet. No.
I watched it on opening weekend. Obviously, I was a huge He-Man fan growing up. I wasn't sure what to expect. When the first trailer that came out, I was like, I don't know, this looks pretty stupid. Second trailer came out, and I was like, okay, this is a flavor of stupid that I'm into. And by the time the movie came out, I was pretty like hyped for it because I think I had read enough positive buzz on it that it was like, okay, it's stupid, but it's a good time at the movies. And that is what it ended up being, which was pretty stupid, but a fun time at the movies. I was surprised though that there were a lot of people giving it a lot of praise for being more than stupid. Like, oh, this is a great, nostalgic, you know, um, trip down memory lane for me. And uh, I thought a lot of the action was overpraised. I thought that Skeletor, portrayed by Jared Leto, was overpraised. Uh, I will watch a second He-Man movie if they make one, but I don't know. I thought that I was an interesting movie that didn't obviously didn't light the box office on fire either. So who knows if they'll even continue, with this franchise? But I don't know. Where are you at on He-Man? Was that something you were attuned to in your youth?
Well, so yes, as I watched the cartoon when I was a kid, I had a couple of the action figures, but not a ton because we didn't have a whole lot of money. But I think I'm similar to you in the respect that I felt the same way about the trailers. I was like, okay, this looks like goofy fun. Like if you go in with the right attitude, you're going to have a good time with it. But what I think is interesting, because we're basically sandwiched between there was Star Wars, there was the Mandalorian, and then Obsession and Backrooms came out, and then He-Man after it, and it's like these two successes in the middle that overperformed over anybody's expectations, sandwiched between two older established, what we would consider sort of like classic IPs. Obviously, one more successful than the other, but still, both of which underperformed. And I started thinking about what I thought was interesting about it is that there's been a chokehold that late 70s and early or mid 80s franchises have had for a very long time. I think arguably it's probably because that's when blockbusters began, so they're the oldest ones that are blockbusters. But I almost feel like in the same way that people now will look at the original Bela Lugosi Dracula as an important movie, but like a quaint one that isn't
Hmm.
scary anymore.
Yeah.
I wonder if it's possible that the IPs have been around for so long that we don't look at them as classic anymore, as eternal, as they are kind of like they're old. It would be like, like Sam Raimi shopping, trying to make The Shadow for 25 years.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I love the idea of The Shadow, but The Shadow is not an IP that's moving anybody's eyebrows at this point. And I wonder, is it possible that like there are younger generations now and there are new IPs, there's new things that are interesting to new generations. And unless you reinvent the old ones, it's not going to bring in the same kinds of crowds that it used to, just simply because, we've had a chokehold on it for a long time. And I say we because I'm of that generation of the 80s
Hmm.
stuff. But, other generations would like us to move aside and let them have their tent poles now.
Yeah, and that's why I think that I mean, just circling back to what we were saying, like I think it does require, it isn't enough just to find that niche thing and put it up on the big screen. Like it does require that, just innovative, interesting take on it, that obviously is not always going to happen. I mean, not every movie is going to be, Barbie, or not every movie is going to have like something super interesting to say about its subject matter, and that's okay. But I mean, it does feel like it, I mean, to take something like He-Man, you know, it can be just a summer blockbuster and it can do okay, or it can say something really interesting about the material. And I think that's why like you get those filmmakers like I forget her name, but I don't know, you'll probably know it, the one who made I Made the TV Glow, or what was it called?
Jane Schonenbrunn. Yeah.
Yeah, like so she's coming out with a movie this year that's like kind of a play on slasher movies, right? Like it's sort of a meditation on like this is filmmakers like that who are just like taking, something that is part of pop culture that is, part, and but like putting an interesting, personal spin on it. I think I mean, I'm not saying those movies are going to be blockbusters or whatever, but I can imagine like a He-Man or Masters of the Universe movie that comes out that has like a really, you know, off the wall kind of take on it that could be like a huge hit versus something that's just a middling success because it's, standard summer blockbuster take. Uh,
Yeah. Well, also, I think a lot of this boils down to like studios never really adjusting to the idea that there's just way more shit for people to go to now.
mhm. Yeah,
So
yeah.
you can't guarantee a blockbuster just by spending enough money on it the way you could 30 years ago. And so one of the reasons why it's smarter to make lower budgeted films is because you can have a few of them fail. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know. It occurs to me that like you've gone the opposite direction now. You're spending even more on giant franchises in the hopes. You know what I mean? Like if we spend whatever hundreds of millions of dollars on this one thing, it has to be a thing we recognize because otherwise we've blown our money. But at the same time, it's an established thing that has a long history, and we want it to. So you can't be too crazy with it. Don't go crazy with it because we have to use it again tomorrow. So like it's a sort of double-edged sword.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Um, Last thing on He-Man for me, like we were talking over text, like there's a part of me that wonders like how successful just like a straight, you know, swords and sandals with magic and technology, like just kind of like barbarian version of that movie could have worked. Maybe with still a comedic lens to it, but or maybe it could be straight. I don't know. I mean, there's lots of ways you can do it. Um but obviously they, you know I think that the aesthetic they went for was more of a Marvel or like just kind of tongue-in-cheek take on it, which I think, obviously was didn't lead to like a huge success. But yeah, I don't know, there's a part of me that thinks like, maybe just like a really like bad badass like barbarian riding a green tiger, fighting hordes of like skeletons or whatever. Like could be really badass. I don't
Yeah,
know, or it could be really stupid. I don't know.
for
But
sure.
but there's a part of me
Yeah,
that
well,
thinks
I
like
mean,
that
here's the
maybe
thing:
that would
is
have been
like
a swing.
I think it should honestly at this point, like, why don't you take that risk? You know what I mean? Like, why not make it like a Robert Howard, Conan the
Yeah.
Barbarian, or like even like go a little darker with it? But I mean, the dude is named He Man. Like, there's always going to be an inherent sense of like absurdity to it. But like, why not lean into the straight faced absurdity instead of like winking and being like we're in on the joke? Like, if you play it straight, that in some ways is even funnier. You know, like that you don't wink at the audience and you do it like we talked about the idea that there was a remake of Deathstalker, the 80s fantasy film. And the thing I love about it is that it never winks. It's absolutely sort of a comedy, but it's also a love letter to those movies, but it takes it seriously and that's why it's funny, you know?
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Uh, cool. All right. Well, let's transition to some predictions because that's what this show is known for, right?
That's why everybody showed up.
All right. So on the docket for predictions today, we have a few casting announcements for that have been long in the works, but I think interesting to discuss. So first one I thought I'd bring up is the casting of Sadie Sink in Spider-Man Brand New Day. Um, long rumored, lots of different characters been rumored that she might be portraying. Movies coming out in a few weeks or less than a month, I think, and they still haven't actually announced who she's playing. Lots of speculation. The top contender in the speculation is that she's playing Jean Grey, which I think is really interesting. I guess my first question is, what is your prediction for who she's playing? And then, yeah, let's go from there.
Yeah, well, I 100% agree with it. And the reason the reason I'm willing to 100% agree with it is because I think it's a terrible idea. But that's neither here nor there.
No, I want to talk about
It's
why it's a terrible
crazy to
idea
me.
because I have different opinions about it as well.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so this is what I think. I think the X Men is one of the only franchises inside of Marvel that wasn't part of the MCU that unabashedly proved itself to be a standalone thing that was a success. Spider Man was, and the X Men. They tried Fantastic Four. They tried a few other ones, and they were to like middling success. But X Men is arguably one of the longest running superhero franchises. And so it's crazy to me that when they're being brought back into the fold, right? We're getting ready to do giant story with Doomsday where they're going to bring original cast members
Right.
back from that. We're going to see them probably die or disappear or whatever, be replaced. And then the new resetted MCU is going to have an X-Men presence. It's crazy to me that like right before this giant thing that's a send off to all those characters, they're going to introduce the X-Men mutants into the universe like through a small supporting role in a Spider-Man movie. And I don't know, it just feels like why would you rob the opportunity to like have the swan song for the original version of it that you now own and are allowed to use? Why would you do that and then undercut yourself? Like, why would you pull the rug a little bit in the
Right.
movie that comes right before it, unless there's some way that her character leads to the connection of the universes in some way? If that's not
Yeah.
part of it, I'm like, I just don't get it. It just doesn't make sense to me.
I think that hits on exactly what. So number one, I think she's great casting for Jean Grey. Like I think she's going to be great in an
Yes,
X-Men movie playing Jean
100%.
Grey. It's really great. Number two, I do think it's fun for her to be in a Spider-Man movie. Like I don't have any objections to her. Like you know, and a lot of people have been like, "Well, Jean Grey hasn't historically interacted with Spider-Man. What's that?" Like I'm okay with that. I think it's fun to do different pairings that we haven't seen. That's totally fine with me too. Um, what is confusing though is that coming out of Secret Wars, everybody assumes there will be some kind of merged universe, and it's I think that the complexity of that or the mechanics of it are just like they just sound really cumbersome, and there's almost no version of it that is going to be clean and easy to understand. You're going to end up with a situation where either the characters remember their previous universes and now they're like smushed together, and you're gonna have some kind of like, you know, I don't know, like every interaction is gonna be like, whoa, back in my universe, this happened, or it's gonna be kind of a, the timeline is reset and everybody remembers a shared universe where mutants and the Fantastic Four and the Avengers have always been together or whatever, and that sounds like a nightmare to me. Like that sounds like what I don't know. Like it's frustrating in comic books when they do that. In a movie universe where you're only coming out with a movie, like, a couple of movies a year and maybe a few TV shows in between as well, it just sounds so cumbersome and complicated. And so I don't know, like, and yeah, the fact that um presumably a lot of characters in the Marvel universe will have interacted with a different universe's set of mutants, and then post Secret Wars will interact with a new version of Cyclops and a new version of Professor X, with Sadie Sink playing Jean Grey. And I don't know, there's a certain amount of hand waving that fans are used to, but I don't, that one seems unnecessarily complicated and cumbersome, so I don't know.
100%. Well, and it also goes to the thing you were talking about, and maybe you want to connect this into some of the other castings that we've heard. But like the weird thing about how long we feel like we know that a thing is happening in a movie when it hasn't been confirmed, but everybody's talking about it as if it has been confirmed because they're not even really saying rumored anymore. It occasionally crops up, but they're not. It's not really what they're saying. They're just
Well, it's
saying
funny.
like, Sadie Sink as Jean Grey is using her powers or whatever. It's like, okay,
She's currently doing press junkets with the other three, this with Tom Holland and Zendaya and Jacob, and she's like awkwardly sitting there saying, "Well, I can't really talk about who I'm playing," which is funny. I mean, so I'm a nut for talking about the marketing of movies as well as the movies themselves, and so this kind of like, who is this character, who is this actress playing, kind of thing is really interesting to me as a topic. I think sometimes it can work. For the most part, I almost always think, um, unless like, I mean, unless we're in a situation where the entire movie she's unnamed, and maybe at the end she's like, "Oh, by the way, my name is Jean," or something. You know what I mean? Like, if that's the way the movie is gonna go, then maybe that makes sense for them to keep her name under wraps. Um, I don't know, but for me, I'm like, I'd rather a movie market itself as what it is, versus as, um, some kind of big surprise that you're going to experience in the movie theater. Like,
yeah.
to me, the best
Well,
example of that is Captain America, Brave New World, because that movie was a Sam Wilson versus, leader movie that has a third act reveal that the Red Hulk is, part of it. But they marketed it the opposite, which is they marketed it as a Sam Wilson versus Red Hulk movie with a surprise villain in there, the leader. But that's not how the movie worked. So it's a really weird experience to watch it, and you're like, well, I already know that he's going to turn into the Hulk, and why are you trying to tease this mysterious villain? I don't know. I just think that's really weird and a dumb way to market your movie. I think Spider-Man is going to be super successful, but I just don't see a version where it hurts the movie's box office if you say, Sadie Sink is playing a powerful mutant named Jean Grey, and it's kind of similar to like what they did with Mysterio, where the marketing made it seem like he was a hero, but you're a fan and you know that he's obviously a villain. It didn't hurt the experience of watching the movie, because that reveal that he is a villain was still fun and entertaining, you know.
right.
So like, presenting Jean Grey as the villain of the movie um, isn't a bad way to market it or present it, even if we all know she's actually good. You know what I mean? I don't know. I
Yeah.
much prefer like the movies telling you what it is than this dumb kind of surprise.
Yeah. Well, listen, I've not been shy about my feelings about how I feel like J.J. Abrams broke the way that
Yeah,
we talk about movies.
yeah,
He was the guy. Like, I get it for certain movies, okay? I get it for Cloverfield. That was actually a very clever marketing campaign. But like the secret of Star Trek Into Darkness, or the things that he had to hide about Super 8, that turned out to just be like an Amblin movie about an alien. What's
right,
frustrating about that is that it treats every movie like, you can't know anything, we can't talk about anything, it's the world's biggest secret. You have now set me up to feel like it's not going to deliver if it's not the biggest thing ever. Like, just tell me what your friggin' movie is about. You know what I mean? Like, just marketing is a thing and people do it. And so, yeah, that always frustrated me. But it's also, that also creates that ancillary market where, like, now, like you said, the entire internet wants to know everything about every movie because you don't want to tell us. We need to
right.
get it because you haven't given it to us. Well, like, just give us some stuff. I'm not gonna chase you down if you were like, oh yeah, hey, one of the X-Men's going to pop up in the next Spider-Man movie. Isn't that exciting? Like, Yeah, that actually is exciting. And if you
Right,
told
that's
me
what I was
that,
gonna
I would be more
say. Like,
interested.
yeah, you can present it as it is, and that is exciting. Yeah, it's just really funny to me. I mean, like in the latest trailer, like she's not even her face is obscured even in the in the trailer. Um, which again, I'm still excited for this movie because I do think there are a lot of genuine surprises left, to be revealed. Like, if we haven't even seen Tombstone, I have a feeling that he's probably like a bigger part of the movie than is being portrayed in the trailers. I think, Spider-Man fight. I also think it's kind of interesting that I am kind of curious if the movie will have a Spider-Man, Punisher, Hulk, Jean Grey like hero moment. And if like Spider-Man like says something like hey, we should call ourselves I don't know, the Fantastic Four. uh because I
Wink,
want
wink.
yeah, because there's a part of me that was like, oh, you know what, that could be a t-shirt, or that could be like some stupid thing that they brush out there, because why not. um
You
but
want to
yeah,
do you what you want is one of those things where like in a biopic where at the end of the movie Bruce Banner goes, "I would really love to help you learn to control your powers. I have a friend who runs a school up in New York."
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I think again, I think it's gonna be a great movie. I just think the way they're marketing it is just silly. Um, the way they did No Way Home, it made sense for them to keep Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire under wraps. Like that made sense. It was a fun surprise. I mean, surprise, even though most people expected them to appear. But this, like, it's just kind of goofy. I mean,
Yeah.
but it does bring
Well,
up
it,
the
it it
large.
goes
Go
back to
ahead.
that thing you were talking about though with the leader, right? Like no, I love Tim Blake Nelson. No one in the world was waiting for the leader. So keeping him a
Right.
secret didn't get you any cachet from the audience. You know what I mean? Like you earned nothing extra by like not revealing it in the marketing and then oh big surprise the leader's back after what was it 16 years or something? And it was like nobody cared. I like him, but again, it wasn't a secret that was worth keeping ultimately.
Yeah, and so this does segue a bit into just the larger trend of casting an actor, not revealing who they're playing. I don't have any issues with that. Like, I mean, sometimes they don't reveal who they're playing because it isn't that interesting. Like, I'm thinking of like casting Bill Murray in Quantumania, and he was just kind of like a random, no-name Marvel character, and there was a few people cast in that movie that fit that
Yep.
description. And that happens with Marvel all the time. Like sometimes a good name actor is cast in something, and they don't explicitly say who they're playing because it's not important to the marketing of the movie, or anything you need to know going in. Um,
Yep.
Obviously, I think I have a difference of opinion when it comes to the Sadie Sink situation. On the DC side, it is funny because so thinking of uh, I guess let's start with Batman Part Two. A lot of casting announcements made. Matt Reeves did a whole X thread of welcome to the cast of different actors: Sebastian Stan, Brian Tyler, Tyree Henry, Scarlett Johansson, Charles Dance, and then obviously everybody returning from the first movie. Uh, they didn't announce who they were all playing, and a lot of the initial speculation was that Sebastian Stan was playing Harvey Dent, that Scarlett Johansson was playing his wife, that Charles Dance was playing his father. But that was all upended with a rumor that he was actually playing Zaz, the serial killer in the Batman universe. Um, so to me, it is interesting, again, the marketing of the movie, keeping who he's playing a secret. Like, I am curious what, like, if you just say that the movie is a Batman versus Zaz, murder, uh, serial killer kind of detective story, that's interesting. And I don't see the point in keeping that a secret, or keeping, yeah, I don't know. Like, what do you think about that?
Yeah, well, that one confused me all along because the only reason I can think of that you wouldn't say who's playing who is because there's such a long history of Batman stories and well-known Batman stories that by announcing the names of the characters they're playing, it might head nod towards a famous
Hmm.
storyline that could be the thing that they're telling. So I get that, but also there is what is it, 60 years of Batman, like Two-Face and Zaz have been in many of the same stories, so that's
Right.
not really giving away necessarily, oh, is it the Parliament of Owls? Is it is it a story that takes place inside of Arkham? Like, there are a ton of ways that those characters could interact. So I don't really understand the idea of obscuring it when saying something like that could create potential positive interest without necessarily giving anything away. It feels similar, and I think it's interesting. Matt Reeves, who comes from the J.J. Abrams school,
Yeah.
is doing a similar thing. You know what I mean? Is obscuring things that aren't necessarily mysteries and therefore aren't necessarily going to be big reveals ultimately in the story.
Yeah, and so this one also touches on something that I think is interesting that will play into the next one that we'll talk about. But when Sebastian Stan was cast, all of the trades just confirmed, oh, he's playing Harvey Dent. And I'm assuming that they had sources, either like casting directors or different people in production that maybe fed them the idea that he was playing a specific character, and so that's what they ran with. Um, if it turns out that he's playing Harvey Dent, then, they were right all along. Or if he's playing a different character, then I think that's really interesting how that. Um, so what I think is interesting is that, and unique from like the Sadie Sink situation where Marvel has not said that she's playing anybody, like they haven't. And as far as I know, like no trade has come out with a definitive, oh, this is who she's playing. There's maybe they've played into the speculation, but not more than that. What, what do you think? Like to me, I don't know, like because of these filmmakers are so active on social media and and releasing statements, and like there's part of me that almost thinks, what, shouldn't you just come out and say like, oh, they're not playing them or they are? I don't know. What?
Well,
Uh,
no,
yeah,
it's funny you say that because I think, we know of the two of us, I'm obviously the far bigger fan of James Gunn, and I generally think he can kind of do no wrong. But he is the biggest defender when it comes to, he'll weigh in and be like, that's a ridiculous rumor. That's definitely not true. But he'll do it like 35% of the time. And then the
right.
rest of the time, he just sort of lets it float. And then
Yeah.
sometimes you find out, oh, that one was also not true, but he didn't say anything about that one. Why? Like, what are you doing, man? What kind of weird game are you playing with us here?
Well, let's go right into the one that I think is the most fun to talk about, which is you say the actress's name because I don't think I know her, but the one who's been cast
Is it?
to play.
Oh,
Go
is
ahead.
it, yeah, Adria Arjona, right?
Yes. She has been cast in the movie Man of Tomorrow, which comes out next year. It's currently in production. She was apparently the last person cast in the film. There were a couple people cast prior to her that kind of fit in that same category. Like Matthew Lillard was cast in the movie, but didn't say who he's playing. I kind of feel like that's because he's probably playing just kind of like a, not heroic or villainous character. He's probably playing like a government agent or something like that who maybe has a name in the comics, but not somebody that you would make a big announcement about. Um, so the circumstances behind her casting were apparently there was several actresses auditioned for this role. She has a long relationship with James Gunn, so uh, and so the casting was initially just very vague. It was she's playing some type of warrior woman. When she was announced as joining the cast, most of the trades came out with she was playing a character named Maxima from DC Comics, who is part of the Superman, supporting cast. Somebody who's been in the comics. But most people kind of assume, because of the way she looks, her stature as an actress, that why wouldn't she be playing Wonder Woman? And so I go back and forth on whether she is playing Maxima or Wonder Woman. And before I tell you what I think, like, how do you feel about like where that one will land?
Yeah, no, I'm totally like torn down the middle in the sense that I absolutely want it to be Wonder Woman because I think Adria Arjona is perfect for that role. Um, and at the same time, I think it's a terrible idea to introduce Wonder Woman as like a second or third supporting character in a movie that is already top tiered by the Superman versus Lex. Like, it feels like a move that James Gunn wouldn't normally do. In it's he has introduced other characters, but I don't know. It feels dismissive to that character, and it also feels insane to me that coming off of Andor and Hitman and all of the other big hits movies that she's been in,
Hmm.
that you're gonna make a movie and put her in it with a character like Maxima, who's not a bad character, but there's no way that this is a tentpole figure that's going to continue popping up in very important ways throughout the DC universe, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah, and she's headlining an action movie that's coming out this year, right? So like, I mean, she is. I mean, obviously not like the most known actress, but she is, somebody who can lead a movie. Um, yeah, I think what's funny to me is part of me thinks that maybe her appearance in the film is more like Millie Alcock in Superman. Like maybe it's just kind of like a very small scene, but they needed to cast Wonder Woman, and so they did. To me, if it was Maxima, I kind of feel like because she has a friendship with James Gunn, he just would have asked her to play the role and she would have done it, It,
That's a good
to
point.
me, the fact that they did do auditions and all of the actresses fit the, um, physical appearance of Wonder Woman more than Maxima, it makes me
Yeah.
think that, well, of course, if for a higher profile character, you would do auditions with even if you had a favorite, like we really think that she would do a great job as Wonder Woman, but it's such a big character and an important piece of the universe to cast, you would want to see other actresses, right? For Maxima, I just don't see like um why you would. I don't know, it's weird. And so if we're both right, or if I'm right, because my prediction is that she is playing Wonder Woman, uh why wouldn't you just come out with a press release and say, hey, we've cast AJ Arjona as Wonder Woman? Because that's a cool
Yeah.
announcement to make. You know? I think that would make a lot
Do
of
you
people
think it's
happy.
possible though?
Yeah, go
Yeah,
ahead.
I was going to say though, do you think it's possible that that is and has always been the intent, but they
Mhm.
weren't going to do it during the like they wanted to save it. You know what I mean? They want to be able
Yeah,
to like tear out the stuff. And I think at a certain point, maybe the horse got away from them a little bit here,
yeah,
in that
yeah,
the conversation became such a big thing that like, well, I can't say no, but I also don't want to confirm it because I'm like busy in pre-production, and like to a certain degree, like it just become a thing where we're like,
yeah.
okay, yeah, we fumbled the ball on this one, you know?
I think the perfect case study or like example of this is probably when they announced Chadwick Boseman as Black Panther. He was a character that a lot of fans wanted to see. uh they announced on stage at, I don't know if it was Comic-Con or just like a independent event that they held, that he was going to be a character in Civil War. Actor comes out on stage, they already have concept art of what the character, like the costume, is going to look like. They show that on screen, and it's like a nice cool big unveiling of Black Panther's coming to the Marvel universe. Obviously you can't replicate that, but I still kind of feel like if she is playing Wonder Woman, like that would have been like a really cool thing to announce in a cool coordinated way, versus oh, she's going to show up in Man of Tomorrow, and it could be an amazing scene, it could be really cool, but I don't know. It's just part of me is like, um, uh, well, and in defense of James Gunn and DC, they haven't said that she's playing Maxima, so they aren't necessarily playing into the game of who's she playing or who's she portraying. That's more of a
Yeah.
fan thing. So I don't know. Like maybe from their perspective, they're like, it's still going to be cool when she shows up on screen as Wonder Woman. I don't know.
Or she's playing someone that works at the Daily Planet, and we're all
Yeah.
so far off.
Yeah, that could be. Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, who knows who she's playing? I mean, but I don't know. I'm staking my claim. I think she's definitely playing Wonder Woman. I've gone back and forth
Yeah.
multiple times, but that's kind of where I've landed. She's playing Wonder Woman. What do you think?
Well, and now that you said the thing about like, well, what if she serves the Supergirl from a Superman
Yeah,
role? That makes a lot more sense to me because I don't remember when they announced Millie Alcock,
yeah.
Alcock, whatever.
I think it was
I don't remember when
later.
they
Yeah,
announced her, but I was going to say, but it was later. But also, she was not as high profile at the time. Like it had been a couple of years since she had been on season one, I think, of House of the Dragon.
Mhm.
So like right now, Adria Arjona, because she had the previous connection and because Andor had just lit the world on fire, I feel like maybe there's more conversation to want to shove that to the foreground than there was with Millie. So maybe they were going with the same playbook, but they just slightly underestimated the difference in what public reception would be to this announcement versus hers.
Yeah, for sure. Um, and actually, that's a good one to bring up because I do think when she was announced as joining the cast of Superman, it was as Supergirl. So I don't think there was any, tease about that one. So yeah, But
who also
I guess
works at the
just
Daily Planet.
right. So to get your prediction now though, who do you think she's playing?
Yeah, no, I think that was well argued because I was on the fence about whether there was a good way to execute that. But given the point you brought up about Supergirl, like I'm now fully on board because I always wanted her to play
Yeah.
Wonder Woman. So you saying that makes me think, oh yeah, that's an obvious, really solid in. And also the fact that we know that Anna Nogaro, who wrote Supergirl, moved on and was fast tracked to write Wonder Woman, which I think was probably approved pretty quickly. But I know there was a really fast approval for Supergirl. So the fact that they fast tracked it and then we get this announcement, like all of the arrows seem to point to that thing to me.
Yeah, that's the other thing that I was going to say is that I feel another confident prediction. I think that the next cinematic DC movie coming in 2028 will probably be a Wonder Woman movie. I think that that will probably get announced. You know, uh, yeah, I don't know. I'd say this year they haven't made any announcements about 2028. So I would expect by the end of this year for uh, movie releases to be announced for post Man of Tomorrow, and I feel pretty confident it's probably a Wonder Woman movie, and so that again speaks to the urgency of casting that role. And yeah, so I would expect her to play Wonder Woman first in Man of Tomorrow, and then 1 year later in a Wonder Woman solo movie in 2028.
Yep. And then obviously there's going to be the Clayface versus Lobo film that we're also excited for.
Uh, Man, Jason Momoa is getting so much praise for Supergirl, and that's a good segue because I think we're going to close it out with some predictions for Supergirl, which comes out next weekend. So I think we can give our predictions for the movie and then come back following the movie with our reactions to it. So there have been social media reactions that have come out this week, pretty positive from what I've seen. And like I said, both her performance as Supergirl has been praised. His performance as Lobo is getting a lot of, great. He's, being called a scene stealer in a positive way, which is fun. I mean, he isn't a character in the graphic novel, which I've read, and I don't think you have, but uh, I love the graphic novel. I'm fully expecting it to deviate from the source material, and I don't have any issues with that. I think it's going to be really interesting for me to see how they deviate from it. Um, but uh but yeah, what's your level of hype for Supergirl, and what are your predictions?
Yeah, well, I think I'm probably more hyped for Super. I think I've told you before. I'm always excited for the expansion of the crypto cinematic universe. Um,
Right.
so I do think that there's going to be some audience members that are a little upset about the way that crypto plays into this story as opposed to
Right.
into Superman. We'll see how that affects the family friendly nature of this movie versus the first one. But the other thing that I think is really interesting that also maybe butts up against the family friendly element is that they've been talking about it like basically a cosmic Mad Max, which is very exciting to me. Like,
Yeah.
if you want to get me on board a story, tell me that it's like a post apocalyptic thing. Because I love the sort of the grimy vibe of Mad Max. Um, I do think it's going to perform softer, obviously, than Superman. I think, and I think it's going to probably. I think what's going to end up happening is that it's not going to do as well financially as Warner Brothers would have hoped, but I do think it's going to get really good reviews, which is going to be its saving grace in the sense that often what happens is a movie doesn't perform well, then that reflects on the quality of the movie. But I think it's going to be very well reviewed. And I think Millie Aycock is going to be, everybody's going to love her. And same with Momoa as Lobo.
Yeah.
So I think the challenge with this movie is that it is, this is different than a lot of Marvel movies, except for the very early Marvel ones, in that there was not a ton of connective tissue other than I know we're going to get Superman a little bit in this
Hmm.
movie. This story is not earthbound. We're not going to get, I don't think, a bunch of cameos from people other than Superman himself in
Right.
here that we recognize. And so while it is expanding the universe in a cool way, it is also risking not having any of the familiar things that we like from Peacemaker or Creature Commandos or Superman, aside from Superman. Now, obviously, it was smart to bring Superman in. So I think ultimately what's going to end up happening is it's going to take Man of Tomorrow to prove to everybody that this whole thing is a smart continuing endeavor. But I think this one is going to perform well for what it needs to do, which is to say, an entry that doesn't have Superman in it can still be super entertaining, have great performances, and be like a good tentpole movie outside of just being a superhero movie.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a pretty good showcase for this character. And for most people, it's going to feel like an unexpected take, like most people probably think of Supergirl as just being, the girl version of Superman, and both the graphic novel and then, everything that you can tell from the marketing of this movie and the way they talk about it, it's not that, she's like they have actually crafted, a unique character, with a really compelling backstory, and it's a different attitude. I can say, um, uh, I've seen Supergirl in different iterations from the comics to many different cartoons that my girls have watched. That like there's a DC Superhero Girls cartoon. There's Super Best Friends Forever. There's lots of iterations of Supergirl. And over the last like 5 or 6 years, they've really leaned into like the tough girl kind of persona for Supergirl, which is fun. And this kind of feels like, sort of like that as well. I think it's going to be really fun. I don't expect it to be as quippy or as like humorous as like your standard Marvel movie, or even as funny as Superman was. I think it's probably going to be more, kind of serious kind of tone with, jokes here and there. But yeah, I expect it to be kind of like a more harder edged movie. Um, I'm really looking forward to it. Um, uh, you know, I think the biggest kind of change from the source material is Lobo, but I'm kind of curious to see what other things they change. And, I'm also really interested in the screenwriter because I think this will be the first kind of, movie produced based on one of her scripts. And she's like a pretty integral part of the DC, you know, universe, like both, more movies coming out from her. And so that'll be really interesting to view and to judge. Um, so yeah, I don't know. I'm excited about it. I think as far as predictions go, I was wondering if we should expect to see any elements of either, you know, stuff that came up in Peacemaker, like, you know, Argus or Salvation or any of that kind of stuff. I'm guessing no. But should we expect to see any teases towards Brainiac? That one, I don't know if I want to make a confident prediction, but I guess I would say there's more likely some kind of tease towards Brainiac, I would think, than any kind of like more of the Earthbound stories that
Yeah.
is being
Yeah. I mean, I
yeah,
think ultimately it depends on which Brainiac they go with, but for sure, if he's connected in any way to the history of Krypton, as he
right,
has been in some previous incarnations, this one has, it seems like, a huge amount of connective tissue to the old Krypton, because she obviously was there longer than him, was raised,
mhm.
as a person on Krypton longer, and therefore has more interaction with the people. We're even meeting other Kryptonians in this, so there definitely does seem to be like a little breathing room for that.
Yeah. So that would be interesting to see. I think that I think they've done a really good balance of making these things connected, but not feel like homework or steps on a roadmap that you have to follow. I mean, they are pretty self-contained, so I think that I wouldn't expect too many connections to either stuff that has come before or teases to stuff coming out next year. Um, but yeah, yeah, I'm excited about it. I'm
Yeah,
I'm
same
less of
here. I
a
think it's a
crypto guy
really
though.
well. You like listen. You have daughters, and I think for arguably you and I are coming at the film from different reasons and with different perspectives.
There you
And I
go.
think it's very cool to see a franchise have its second tentpole movie be about one of the prominent female characters, and it
Yeah,
wasn't
yeah.
Wonder Woman, because that's usually the no brainer go to. So I really like the level of confidence that Gunn had in wanting to do a female centric single film, single character film, not like a team film, and to have a female writer on it. So I don't know. For me, that's one of the other reasons I want to support it. Just like on a meta level, I like that they're making those kinds of decisions that aren't just the frightened studio decisions. You know what I mean? It
Yeah,
really
yeah.
does seem like it's coming from a place of I want to give something to the fans that care about these characters, and I want to do something that's different than what's been out there. So,
Okay, so we can't come back next week with reactions and reviews to the movie, um, without revisiting a confident prediction that we make before we see the movie. So, so I'll give you a minute to think of one. I'll also take a minute to think of a confident prediction, and then we can wrap. But so for Supergirl, I confidently predict that Streaky the Super Horse will be in the movie. That's my confident prediction.
You don't think Lobo took over the important part of his role?
That's been some speculation, but no, I think you can't have a Supergirl movie without her super horse. I think that I will be pissed off and um, livid if there's no super horse in this movie. So that's my confident prediction.
Yeah. All right. Well, my confident prediction is that they have secretly, maybe not secretly, but like not been talking much about the fact that they went and shot a new closing credit sequence, a new post credit sequence, because they did not expect quite as much positive feedback about the Lobo character as they have gotten.
Yeah.
And I think that sequence is going to be focused on Lobo with an intent towards a project specifically geared towards him. Like he's going off with the intent of we're going to follow him on another film, because I think he's going to be, well, everybody in this is going to be breakout because we haven't seen him before. I think he's going to be the thing everybody's talking about. And I think that they're going to lean into it in a similar way that they did with Mr. Terrific from Superman.
I think that's a good prediction. I think that one might come true. Mine probably less so, but we'll see.
Are you kidding? You think James Gunn is going to create a universe where we don't get a super horse? Come on.
Yeah, maybe that's a good way of looking at it. And I hope so, because I want to see a super horse with like a horse wearing a cape. Like that's great.
Yeah, I'm sold. Like if you feel that way about horses the way I do about crypto, then for you, I want this to happen.
Thank you. Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, we'll leave it there, man. We'll be back to talk about Supergirl once we've both seen it. But yeah, I think we have some good predictions in the can, and we'll see how we shake out.
We don't have to see; they're all 100% right. But
Exactly.
we'll talk to you about how right they are next time.
All right. All right. Well, thanks, man. We'll talk to you soon.